welcome everyone who's new to the stage, the Beyond the Hustle stage, who was here before already. Great that you're still here. I'm super happy to welcome Judith on stage. I have the feeling some of you know Judith already. I also do know Judith already for multiple reasons. We started to meet in networking events, I would say, and at some point we started to organize the Freelance Barcamp together. Last one was just this May, powered by Jimdo, by the way, who's also sponsor of the Freelance Unlocked, so that's great. And next one will be in fall. Date to be announced. But now, without further ado, so that we keep the timing, I'm handing over to Judith, who's a great freelance software developer. So if you need any freelance software developing, talk to Judith. But she will not talk about software development today, but about being your own boss versus being your own worst enemy. I'm super excited for that. Yeah, there's your clicker. Stage is yours.
Thank you, Micha. Good morning. My name is Judith. I'm my own boss, like probably many people in this room. There's the same slide again. There we go. And sometimes it feels like I'm also my own worst enemy. I used to consider myself fairly disciplined and organized. I would usually get good feedback on my work. I met deadlines. I was pretty much on top of things. But then something shifted. My focus went completely out the window. My monkey brain started racing like crazy, and I was deeply unsatisfied with my own work. That all roughly started 3 years ago, I want to say. Coincidentally, around the same time I started freelancing, and it only got worse over time. At some point last year, for the first time, I got fired by one of my freelance clients, and it really wasn't a budget thing. It was a "you're not doing a good job" thing, and the problem was that I was really not doing a good job, and I probably would have fired myself too. So around that time, I realized that something had to change. My current way of working was unhealthy and not sustainable. I was constantly blocked and almost paralyzed by feeling like the biggest imposter on the planet. I was procrastinating every single important thing I had to do, and I could barely focus for more than 5 minutes without getting distracted. So what did I do? I submitted this talk because I thought Thank you. I thought if I have to take the stage and talk about these problems, I would have to solve them first. Surprised that did not work. I'm very much still in the middle of all this chaos. And ironically, especially as I was preparing for this talk today, I could really painfully feel how much I'm still blocked by imposter syndrome, procrastination, and distractions. And to demonstrate that to you, here's a snippet from a conversation I had with Claude. So I asked Claude to proofread my slides, and at some point I was just like, Claude, Claude, my man, I cannot give this talk. I feel like I have nothing valuable to share. And he basically called me out on my bullshit. I was like, babe, you see what you're doing here, right? I felt like the biggest imposter while preparing a talk about imposter syndrome. And also notice the beautiful AI sentence structure here. That's not a problem, that's actually your opening. So Claude said this should be my opening, and by now I know better than to argue with him. So this was my opening, and we're gonna dive right in. We will talk about imposter syndrome, about procrastination and distractions, and most importantly, about why it might not be entirely your fault. It might have been a little bit more than a coincidence that, at least for me, these problems really started to get much bigger around the same time I started freelancing. It's not always easy to distinguish between causation and correlation, but traditional employment does provide a few support systems that suddenly disappear when we go self-employed. That slide is broken. What you should be seeing here is all of a sudden, there's less external validation in the form of, okay, I will just keep talking and pretend that this is supposed to look exactly like this, and we will absolutely not have this problem 5 more times in this talk. all of a sudden there's less external validation in the form of performance reviews, salary increases, or promotions. Also, our clients often expect a high level of expertise and independence from us and just expect us to finish the task on time without constantly checking in along the way. So it might feel like there is less accountability. We also tend to have fewer structures in place. Many of us work from home, so there's no commute as a natural boundary. We often don't have fixed working schedules, and we also tend to have fewer meetings, which, as much as we dread them, do provide some structure. On top of that, there's no one but yourself to look after you. There's no HR department, no manager telling you not to eat lunch at your desk, and no coworkers asking you to join them for a coffee. So what happens when all of these structures disappear overnight? Now imagine like a nice transition here. With less validation, imposter syndrome might fill the gap. With less accountability, procrastination moves in, and with fewer structures, distractions take over. And with no one looking after yourself, it's easy to burn the candle from both ends and then call it dedication. So the main thing I want you to take away from this session today, if you are also dealing with any of these problems, is that it's not your fault. You didn't just lose your discipline, you lost the structures that were holding it up. So we will look at each of these 3 hurdles separately. We will look at the science behind it, what it might look like in day-to-day life, and a few things that might be worth trying. And we will start with imposter syndrome. Here's a long and complicated dictionary definition. But in simpler terms, what imposter syndrome means is you constantly doubt your own skills, you think your success is undeserved, and you are only waiting for someone to finally expose you as the fraud that you think you are. 2 systematic reviews of over 60 studies have found that imposter syndrome is common across all genders, age groups, and professions. So it's not just women. It also tends to be associated with stress, anxiety, depression, and burnout, and depending on severity, can actively interfere with daily functioning. When it comes to treatment for imposter syndrome, there is a huge gap between lay advice, think shiny Instagram reels and YouTube productivity tips, and actual evidence-based interventions, which basically do not exist. In freelancing specifically, imposter syndrome can be an even bigger problem because there are fewer linear markers of success. That means that your success can feel largely invisible, whereas failure is very visible, because you alone are responsible for every little thing that goes wrong. There's no team to soften the blow and no manager to argue on your behalf. You might have also heard of something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which basically says that the more you know, the more painfully aware you are of everything you don't know and everything that could potentially go wrong. Experts consistently underestimate their own competence, whereas beginners overestimate theirs. So that means that feeling like a fraud might actually be a sign that you know what you're doing. But now the big question, what do we do about it? First of all, recognize that imposter syndrome is often strongest when the stakes are highest. So feeling like an imposter might be a sign that you deeply care. Next, I think it's completely fine to sometimes admit that you don't know something. I think "I don't know" is a very powerful and underused sentence, especially when you combine it with something like "I don't know, but I can look into it until Friday," or "I don't know, but I know someone who's an expert on this." Bonus points if that way you generate business for another freelancer. Woo! And finally, talk about it. Be open and honest about it, and you might feel and find that other people are quietly struggling with this too, and you might feel less alone. Micha and I hosted the Freelance Barcamp in Berlin a few weeks ago. It was fantastic. You should absolutely join the next one. And one of the participants facilitated a biggest fuck-up session, and that was solid gold. So try to do something like that. Get a few people together in a room who you trust, where everyone feels safe and comfortable, and just talk about your biggest failures. If you are a little weirdo like me and you don't mind being cringe and vulnerable on the internet, you can also share your fails online. But whatever you do, the point is to break the silence, because imposter syndrome feeds on silence, and community can be the antidote here. Unfortunately, it doesn't stop there, because if you feel like a fraud, why should you even start at all? Enter procrastination. Procrastinating, intentionally putting off the doing of something that should be done. The problem with procrastination is twofold. There's the procrastination itself, that is, we don't get the thing done. But then there's also the emotional response to it, since procrastination tends to come with feelings of guilt and anxiety. The problem with a lot of the productivity advice on procrastination is that it tends to ignore the emotional side of it. That means not only does it not work, it can actually be counterproductive. Feelings aren't facts is a paradigm that's sometimes quite well known in certain flavors of psychotherapy, but feelings can be data points. And when it comes to your resistance to starting on a certain task, it can actually be interesting to get a little bit curious about that resistance, because resistance is often evidence of something. Your resistance might be completely rational. You might be wondering why you should be doing this thing at all, how it benefits you. Your resistance might also be emotional. There might be feelings of boredom or maybe even fear associated with a certain task. And finally, your resistance might be practical. You don't have the tools or the skills to do this task. But be a bit careful here. Maybe you only think you don't have the skills, which brings us back to imposter syndrome. A personal example for me is, again, preparing this talk. I was procrastinating the hell out of it. And when I looked into my resistance to simply just getting started, I found a little bit of everything. On the rational side, I wasn't sure why I'm even doing it. Shouldn't I be billing more hours to my client or improve my technical skills? On the emotional side, I was very excited about speaking here today, but there were also feelings of fear and anxiety around it. And on the practical side, I was convinced that I was in no position to speak here today, since I knew I would be talking about issues I hadn't resolved for myself. In freelancing specifically, procrastination can be quite common because no one is closely monitoring our work. So it can be quite easy and tempting to leave things until the very last minute. It's also easy to appear to be busy all day without actually being productive. And here we have to distinguish between working efficiently and working effectively. Because you can work super efficiently on tasks that don't move the needle at all. So, what do we do about it? I think there's a broken slide. Nice. So what you should be seeing in the back of this big thing is a bunch of the classic productivity advice that we know about procrastination. Things like time blocking your calendar, Pomodoro timers, gamifying the task. For me, personally, none of these worked, but if any of those sound interesting, give it a go. You do you, I'm not judging, you know. It sounds very stupid, but for me, the only thing that really worked was to just start. Start with the absolute smallest step possible and don't wait for the perfect moment to start. As I was procrastinating this talk, one night I think I had a little bit of a panic attack. So the next day I just started writing some things down. It was like a random Monday night. I was super exhausted from doing stupid client things all day. My desk was messy, I didn't have much time, but I just started writing some things down and I immediately felt so much better because I could feel that I was making a tiny little bit of progress in the right direction and I could slowly feel the resistance melt away. I realized that I had been waiting for the perfect moment to start. An uninterrupted block of at least 6 hours on a day where I felt energetic and well-rested, but honestly, that day would just never come. So if that sounds familiar, just try to start with the absolute smallest step possible. Also, sometimes it can be helpful to really ask yourself if you need to get some rest or if you just need to get some work done. Procrastinating can feel absolutely exhausting and draining. And sometimes you might feel like you need to get some rest and take a break. And sometimes that might actually be what you need. Maybe you need a 20-minute nap or go for a long walk and get some fresh air. But sometimes what you need might not be a break, but instead just this feeling of making progress. So, once you've identified why a certain task matters and maybe where your resistance to it is coming from, just start. Start with the absolute smallest step possible, but start, and please start working on the actual task and not something else to distract you from it. Because even once we started working on this big task, there's still one thing standing in our way, and that is distractions. I don't think anyone needs a definition for distractions. We probably all know it very well. And maybe many of you have also already heard the various statistics on distractions, how often the average knowledge worker gets interrupted, how long it takes to regain focus. And as with the other two hurdles, there is a ton of pop sciencey productivity advice out there. But with distractions, even more so than with the other two problems, These tips can be very, very tricky because we are dealing here with a structural and systemic problem. When it comes to distractions, we can observe a phenomenon called cruel optimism. You are offered a tiny and individual solution to a big and systemic problem. You're optimistic that the solution will work, but that optimism is cruel because you will end up blaming yourself when you inevitably fail. We often see this with big structural problems, for example, obesity or depression. We are told that all we need to do is eat a little bit less, move our bodies more, meditate some, and all will be well. And the same thing happens with distractions. Broken slide incoming. What you see behind this is, let me try to jog my memory. Lock your phone in the other room, put on noise-canceling headphones, and turn off notifications. That's the common advice we hear on distractions. Just do this and all is well, and you have beaten distractions. But that's not quite how it works. Because our devices and the apps we are using were designed to be addictive. So what we are fighting here is not a single distraction here and there, but this big monster that is the attention economy. Distractions can be particularly tricky for us freelancers because we often have to do a lot of context switching when we are juggling different clients and a bunch of admin tasks. It can also feel like we need to be available to our clients at all times, and that sometimes means that the boundaries between work and life can feel a bit blurred. So, what do we do about it? First of all, we all need to slow down a little bit. The world around us is constantly speeding up. We talk faster now than people in the 1950s, and people in cities even walk faster than just 20 years ago. So just slow down a little bit. It's a fact. I have the link for that. Slow down a little bit, go for a long, slow walk, without your phone, without headphones. Just let your mind wander a little bit and see what it comes up with. Stop multitasking. It was designed for computers. It doesn't work for humans. Try to focus on one thing at a time. Prioritize sleep. We all know by now that in order to function well, we need a healthy body and a healthy mind, and that includes things like proper nutrition, exercising, and taking care of our mental health. Sleep really is not a luxury, and sleep is the foundation that all of this builds on. This one was the absolute hardest one for me personally, because for the longest time, I would quite simply procrastinate sleep. I was distracted all day, I was unhappy with my own work, then I would stay up until late at night ruminating about how I could feel more productive the next day, and then basically punish myself by still setting an early alarm and going to bed way too late. Also, if, like me, you feel like your attention span has gone shorter and shorter, slowly try to increase it again and just start wherever you are at. That might mean trying to read a book for 10 minutes at a time, or maybe you try focusing on a coding task for just 15 uninterrupted minutes. Another thing that helps me is keeping a monkey brain list. This is a random note on my phone and my computer where I just capture all of the things that my brain insists are super urgent while I'm trying to focus on something else. So if I'm trying to finish this big feature implementation for my client and my brain insists that right now we desperately need how to play some Bruno Mars on the ukulele, it goes on the monkey brain list and we can do it later. And finally, recognize that the attention economy is working against you. So please don't blame yourself for big structural problems. But that doesn't mean that you don't have any agency either. Try to take small, sustainable steps. Slow down, get some rest, and focus on one thing at a time. So, this was imposter syndrome, procrastination, and distractions. Now comes the part where I'm supposed to wrap it all up neatly, but I can already tell you that I won't. Sorry. We started this talk with a lot of chaos. I had gotten fired, I had a panic attack, I overshared about my insecurities to a robot, and I'm still very much in the middle of all this chaos, but I have learned a few things along the way. And most importantly, I have learned that these three things, they don't just coexist, they feed into each other. Imposter syndrome makes us feel like frauds, so we see no reason to start at all, and procrastination moves in, which then opens the door for distractions and ruminating, which means we produce work we're not proud of, which makes us feel like even bigger imposters, and there we go again. And the structural explanation behind all of this is you didn't just lose your discipline, you lost the structures that were holding it up. The scaffolding that traditional employment quietly provided has been removed. We saw a few things that might be worth trying, but I would really encourage you to see these more as a tasting menu rather than a fixed 10-step plan. Try a few things that sound interesting, commit to them for a fixed amount of time, gather some data, and then draw your own conclusions. There's a book called Tiny Experiments by the neuroscientist Anne-Laure Lecunff that I can really recommend. A lot of the ideas from this talk come from her book, so if that sounds interesting to you, go check it out. And also recognize that freelancing isn't linear, yet we often try to measure it the same way we would a traditional career. Traditional employment comes with very clear milestones: promotions, salary increases, performance reviews. Freelancing doesn't have any of that, so sometimes it can be difficult to know whether we're doing well or not. So try to redefine what success looks like for you, or maybe even stop measuring it altogether for a while. Lately, for me, my only measure of success has been whether or not I like how I spend my time on a random Tuesday. The goal here is not to eliminate all of these struggles, it's to be kinder to yourself as you navigate your way through them. We're all still figuring this out, and just knowing that, saying it out loud, and knowing that you're not alone in this can be a pretty good place to start. This is all I have for now, but I would love to keep the conversation going. You can scan the QR code and find all the various ways in which you can connect with me. I also have a mailing list. It's called Low Noise, and the plan is to talk about how to find a more calm approach to working in tech. I have been very, very successfully procrastinating sending out the first issue. So thank you. That also means now is the perfect time to subscribe if you want to find out if I'll ever make it or not. And I think that's my time. Thank you. Yes,
Yeah, a huge round of applause, a huger round of applause for Judith. And it was not your time. We still have 8 minutes, so there is still time for questions. Please submit questions via Slido, or we can also take a few from the audience. There is one question, but there's one from the previous speaker still. Tanzt du noch? So maybe you want to answer that. I don't know. Otherwise, I will just mark it as answered and look forward for new questions coming in, either here or there.
That's a lot of pressure right now, Micha.
Sorry. There was a question here? You can shout, yeah, and you can repeat the question a bit.
A little, yeah, relieved, sure. I'm still a little shaky, but yeah, slowly coming down, yeah. Cool, thank you.
Precise. Okay, I've got one from the internet. Someone submitted it. When almost everybody experiences this, why do we all pretend? Do you know the answer for that?
No, I don't have the answer. I think that was exactly my... You have an answer for that? Yeah, cool. Now I feel like an imposter. No, I really don't have an answer.
No, I think because of the societal pressure. Like, we all have been conditioned to always be perfect, always do the right thing. We were always measured by our grades at school, by the salary that we make, by the title that we had. I quit almost a PhD. I mean, I almost had a PhD and I quit to become a freelancer in a field that I had no idea about. So my tears are just here. Like, I feel you and I feel every one of you. And and we learn to pretend to keep our faces up. And I think it's very brave of you for having done this. And I think we all should do more things like this.
Okay, thank you. One very, very future committing question. Would you consider giving a workshop and discussion around that topic next year? So there will be a next year, apparently. Someone just decided that. Great. And you are there. Question mark.
See you next year.
See you next year. Great. Okay. Then I think we have time for one more question on the topic, and then one other one. How much of the solution is a personal effort, and how much did you use your network to support?
I think the honest answer. Hello. Yes. I think the honest answer is it was mostly a personal effort. I think I opened up quite a bit to my network about it, but I also felt at some point everyone was kind of done talking about the topic. So they were a bit like, yeah, there comes Judith again with her imposter syndrome. So it was a mix of both. It definitely helped to feel not alone in this, but I think most of that was more a personal effort, probably. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Nice.
And then one final question, going a bit away from the topic.
Ooh.
What made you move to freelancing?
I just couldn't handle it anymore.
Honesty.
I think the year before, I had gotten fired from a startup. I joined another startup, which was shit. And I knew that I had to leave that job. And I think I just felt like I couldn't do the whole interviewing process again. And I was also starting to question if my issues were with the companies I worked for or more with the way I was working. And I think I'm usually craving a lot of stability and security. So it was really a jump in the cold water for me. But I think what I was mostly looking for was more freedom and flexibility. And I have that now a little bit.
Woo! Okay. Once again, thank you, Judith. And once again, I think there you can connect and newsletter and so on with Judith. So do that. Very good LinkedIn post. So breaking your normal flow of the timeline. Yeah, thank you again. Final round of applause. And you're probably also around the next 2 days to network, be talked to.
Like an hour to decompress, and then I plan to hang out by the coffee cart.
Coffee cart. Find Judith at the coffee cart from 1 p.m. onwards. Perfect. Okay. Next up, we have Vanessa.